Is the NFL scared of Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins and the Cincinnati Bengals? We'll talk about this coming up next on New Stripe City. Welcome to New Stripe City, a sports YouTube channel. Sometimes for diehard Bengals fans, it's been a while since you guys have seen me. I'm back and I'm here to bring out some new content. We're going to be talking everything NFL. We'll be talking everything NBA. Anything that's a hot topic right now in the sports community will be addressed here on the channel. If you are listening, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. I truly appreciate it. Like I said, you guys know me from back in the day. New Stripe City was mostly a Bengals channel. I am back. I felt like for a while I took a little bit of a hiatus just because I felt like there were enough content creators from the Bengals space here and felt like I didn't know how much there was for me to offer, especially with me doing Cincinnati, especially with me doing AFC North talk. And for me, I've always talked sports just in general. Like a lot of my content has been Bengals, but I wanted to show that I could talk more than just the Bengals. But this will be mostly about the Bengals today, as we're talking about a trending topic in NFL circles and in the NFL community. And honestly, I want to say something about it because I've seen a lot of bad takes on it. I've seen a lot of people going back and forth, changing what they wanted to do. Some people criticizing it. And for me, it's very simple. So, kicking things off, let's talk about the deals. This was something that always had to happen. I know that there's a lot of people within NFL circles, the Bengals community, that thought that this just had no chance of happening. The reason why I felt like this was going to be something that really happened was because Joe Burrow, right? They're like, I don't know why people ever thought that Joe Burrow would not want Tee Higgins back. He never was on record of saying, anything that they could replace T. He never had been kind of showing to me, in my opinion, that he ever wanted somebody other than T. He actually finally came out this past season and said Tee Higgins is in need. Once he saw that people were thinking the Bengals could just essentially replace T, he knew that wasn't the case. And then to me, the biggest thing for the Bengals and one of the reasons that they were able to make that Super Bowl run, I understand people are going to talk about the defense and everything like that, but a huge reason was because people did not know how to guard Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins. It was the Bengals' superpower. It was what propelled them to being one of the top teams in the NFL. It was what made them so hard to be guarded because you had two wide receiver ones, not a wide receiver two. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, Tee Higgins is the highest paid wide receiver two in the NFL. He's not a wide receiver two. He's a wide receiver one. One of the reasons that I argued on this channel and on several platforms for the Bengals to draft Penei Sewell is because they already had a Tee Higgins and a number one wide receiver so that they could essentially fix their offensive line issues and go with the weapon. Well, when they drafted Jamar Chase, I was completely wrong on that fact because guess what? The Bengals ended up going to the Super Bowl his rookie season. They brought an element to their offense that they never had. And as people watched and saw things, they realized the Bengals were unstoppable on offense. The only way that you could stop them was trying to exploit their offensive line. But if you didn't do that, Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase were going to kill you. So for me, that was always the foundation of what the Cincinnati Bengals were. They weren't a team that just got lucky there. They weren't a team that was just Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is amazing. But what made them so unique is because they had Joe Burrow, a top three, top two, in my opinion, top one quarterback in the NFL, paired with two top 10 receivers. And that was just not something that the NFL was ready for. And if you look at it, after that season, teams all went out and went and drafted, traded for wide receivers. That's how A.J. Brown got to Philadelphia because teams were realizing it's a passing league. Receiver is key. Receivers are valuable. Let's go out and go and get them. And once that happened, the Bengals became this team where it was like, how do we break these guys up? How do we get rid of them? How do we move on from this Tee Higgins kind of situation? Because we're not used to the Bengals being this good. Bengals went to the Super Bowl, then they went to the AFC Championship, and people still didn't have an answer for it. They tried to run cover two shell. That wasn't an answer for it. And what made it so hard is you can't double team either one of these guys because the other one is going to kill you. If you double team Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins is going to kill you. If you double team Tee Higgins, Jamar Chase is going to kill you. There were defensive coordinators that had to that were staying up every night to figure out how to stop these guys. And that is why this thing was so hard to break up. And so when it comes to why did the Cincinnati Bengals do it, Joe Burrow is smart enough to realize that these weapons make him one of the most unstoppable offenses in the NFL. And you saw it, right? Like the numbers of how this Bengals offense performs whenever Tee Higgins or Jamar Chase is out is not the same. If Jamar Chase is out, Tee Higgins is still able to do his thing. We've seen him have 200-yard games without Jamar Chase in the lineup. We've seen Jamar Chase be able to have games without T. However, when they don't play together, the offense used to struggle. And one of the big issues for me was a lot of people were like, oh, just do it the Kansas City Chiefs way. They had Tyreek Hill. They got rid of him. They went and got someone else. They also had a top 5 all-time offensive coordinator and Andy Reid. So, yeah, it's easy to replace someone like that if you have a talented elite play caller. The Bengals didn't have an elite play caller. There were times where I felt like sometimes the Bengals literally just made the better play. It wasn't that their schemes were amazing. It was just Tee Higgins head topping somebody, pause, over on a play, or is Jamar Chase making a play to cook somebody. And that was the Bengals offense. A lot of it was, which Joe Burrow likes to do, a lot of it was just on the play, running out, play breaks down. Most of the Bengals plays break down, right? Just because they are not amazingly schemed plays, at least before the season, they weren't like that. And so to me, you always needed players. And you don't have Andy Reid that can just take anybody and put it in and do some kind of complex merry-go-round play that no one sees coming. And so you had to utilize your resources, and your resources in this room were the Bengals, receivers. Like, it's literally why I made this thing behind me is receivers. You see AJ Green over there. The Bengals have always been known for their receivers. And here's the other thing. Like, a lot of people were like, oh, you can just draft and replace. That wasn't going to work. The reason why that wasn't going to work, in my opinion, is that the Bengals have struggled to replace key players. After losing Jesse Bates, after losing some of these players, they struggled to replace them. Even at the wide receiver position, people love to talk about Tee Higgins. People love to talk about Jamar Chase, right? They don't love to talk about Cody Core. They don't love to talk about John Ross. They don't love to talk about a lot of misses that the Bengals had at the receiver position. So there was no guarantee that the Bengals were going to do that. And they went out, they drafted Jermaine Burton last year. Right now, that pick is a miss. Now, mostly because Jermaine Burton has to get some of his off the field issues together. But even from a talent standpoint, we weren't even really able to see much from Burton outside of the Chiefs game. And he did not look like a guy that could replace Tee Higgins. I mean, you looked at it throughout the season. When Tee Higgins was not there, Bengals offense was not the same. Even though Jamar Chase ended up getting a triple crown at the end of the season, a lot of people forget the beginning of the season. Teams were triple teaming them. Teams were running bracket coverage over the top. So it was hard. And Jamar's dad even spoke on this on the Wincinnati podcast. If you aren't subscribed to that, please go over to that channel and subscribe. I've got a description. I've got it in the description in the comments. But he was even saying, like, it's so much easier when Tee Higgins is there. And it became apparent that the Bengals didn't have a plan after Tee Higgins. They didn't have anyone to replace him. They had Andre Yosivas. They had Jermaine Burton. That wasn't working. Those guys weren't going to replace Tee Higgins. And the Tee Higgins value showed once he showed back up. Bengals got off to a slow start. It's not a coincidence that happened with Tee Higgins out, right? A lot of people also have kind of talked about the fact that Tee Higgins, didn't play games and stuff like that. And I always thought that was goofy because the wide receiver position, everybody knows this, it's a position where a lot of people don't play. A lot of people sit out games, and it's a hard, especially when you have soft tissue injuries and all of that. But, like, if people weren't thinking that after they franchised Tee Higgins for one season that in that season he wasn't going to take risks, I don't know what to tell people. And there were people trying to discredit the snaps and all of that. They were trying to go and overanalyze something just to kind of say this is why we should move on from Tee Higgins. I wasn't along with that crowd because looking at it, I'm like, yeah, you can talk about all of this, but Tee Higgins has better numbers than Michael Pittman. Tee Higgins has better numbers than a lot of these guys that were there. So for me, it was like, that's just what's going to happen in this situation. And to me, it was funny because a lot of people ignored the fact that Jamar Chase had been injured. Like Jamar Chase had the hip issue and was out, and people kind of put a blind eye to that. And I was just like, why are you ignoring that, but talking about T? And to me, it was just weird. It was honestly just weird. And it's like, that's fine to talk about injuries, but to me, you have to use that excuse across the board. Like that has to apply to everybody across the board. Deebo Samuel, like, right, he got paid. We all know what his injury history has looked like. He's requested a trade. The team still wanted to keep him. He requested a trade. Brandon Ayuk, all of these guys, like, it happens. Injuries are a part of the game. It's going to happen. And so the Bengals made the decision to bring him back, and it was the right decision. And yes, like, NFL teams are going to be scared because this is the best duo in the NFL. Even when they don't play all of the games, they still have all of the numbers. They still are the most potent offense in the NFL. They were the number one passing attack this offseason. And a lot of people are like, oh, the Bengals defense is this and that. Like, the Bengals defense, when they went to the Super Bowl, was not highly rated when it came to rankings, right? They were, I think, 20th, somewhere near 20th. They were never this top 5, top 10 elite defense. They were a great defense. I'm not taking anything away from what they did because they made plays. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Mike Hilton. They definitely made plays that entire way to the Super Bowl. You can't get to the Super Bowl without the defense. But acting like that this was just some irreplaceable defense where they just had all pros on that end of the ball, and that's just simply not true, right? The Bengals, for what it's worth, were able to hit on guys like Trey Hendrickson. They were able to hit on guys like Mike Hilton. They were able to hit on guys that were perceived to be no names. That was the excuse before, was the Bengals defense had no names and this and that. But once they made that run to the Super Bowl, everybody started to overvalue them. Now, there was Jesse Bates. I do think that he's an all-pro caliber player. They did have Trey Hendrickson. He's an all-pro caliber player. They did have some pretty good Pro Bowl players. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt hasn't made a Pro Bowl, but some people felt like within some of the years that he should have been there. BJ Hill, Larry Ogunjobi. So they had some things there, but in 2022, it's not like this team was just this amazing elite defense. And honestly, a lot of it came, and you have to give Lou credit for his ability to confuse Pat Mahomes. That was the narrative after the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, and after the Chiefs took those L's to them, is how are they able to confuse Pat Mahomes so much? But with this being a passing league, you have to invest on the passing side of the football. So I don't care about people thinking that they're overpaying. They're not overpaying. They're paying the cornerstones of their franchise. They're paying the foundation of their offense. They're paying to keep the advantage that they have had over these other teams. They're paying because they don't have a replacement for Tee Higgins. They're paying because this wide receiver class is weak. They're paying because all the hypotheticals that people wanted to throw out there, the Bengals still have other needs and other positions that they have to fix, right? So obviously the defense needed a makeover. It's been a bad defense the last 2 seasons. However, what a lot of people are looking over is the fact that towards the end of the season, one of the issues that a lot of people have said on the defense is that it was too complex. The scheme was an issue. A lot of people don't realize that the scheme was a huge part of the issue. The scheme made it very confusing for these young players, who some of them weren't even playing, to figure out what was going on. Guess what happened when Lou Anarumo dumbed down his scheme? The defense played better. They were able to make stops. They were able to play together. And if you ever play football, one of the things that can make things super hard is complex things, trying to remember what you're supposed to do on this play, dropping back in coverage as a defensive lineman. Like, You have to be able to set your players up for success. Bengals defense and Lou Anarumo, respectfully, did not do that. Once they started to do that, the Bengals defense started to make stops. Now, they were not some top 10 defense, top 15, top 20, but they made enough stops to give this Bengals offense a chance to win. And a lot of people that are talking right now, oh, the defense is so bad. No. Do they not remember that the Bengals almost still made the playoffs, and they only didn't because of missed field goals from the Ravens? You could point to numerous games. The Ravens are one of their hardest opponents, right? The Ravens barely beat the Bengals in both of those games. And if there are field goals made and there are things that happen differently, they can win that game. They lost to the Patriots. They didn't have Tee Higgins in that game. They lost the Chiefs game on the stupid penalty by the defender at the end of the game. These are things that they could have avoided and easily have won a game. So to sit here and say the Bengals are just doomed and not making the playoffs every single season just because of this is, to quote my guy Divine, asinine. Yes, the defense isn't amazing, right? But this is a defense that has some key players that weren't playing. Myles Murphy never got snaps because Lou Anarumo didn't like Myles Murphy. He didn't want to put him to do anything except contain the run. They're bringing in a new defensive coordinator that's going to change the system. He's familiar with the personnel. That is huge because he was here in 2021 when the Bengals made that run in the playoffs. And as Yash just pointed out, we lost a lot of one-score games, right? So this is going here or there. This is Joe Burrow coming off of a wrist surgery, him trying to get comfortable as well. So there were a lot of variables out there that I don't hear a lot of the talking heads talking about. Then there's people talking about, well, you paid too much and this and that. Who do the Bengals have to pay right now? I'm just saying, are they going to, do you want to give some of these defenders that we're still questionable about more money? I don't understand. Like, outside of Trey Hendrickson, I'm not understanding who the Bengals have to pay. They're still up in the air with Cam Taylor-Britt. They're still up in the air with Dax Hill. They still don't know what they have in some of these guys. Guess why? Because Lou's scheme was an issue. Some of them didn't play. Some of them have had injuries. Some of them have been moved around. And we've seen that with Dax Hill. We've seen that with Myles Murphy. We haven't seen these guys be able to put it on the field enough for us to say, all right, we're willing to invest in that. But you know what you have seen? You've seen Joe Burrow cook. You've seen Jamar Chase cook. You've seen Tee Higgins cook. You've seen Mike Gesicki cook. You've seen these guys on offense, Chase Brown, that have delivered on their draft position, on their free agent acquisition, or on just playing for this team. So if you're going to invest the big dollars on your team, there is no problem with investing that on the side of the team that is working. The worst thing that you can do is take someone that is an unproven commodity on that defense and extend them and waste cap dollars doing it. And guess what? The Bengals free agency classes last year was a bust. Outside of Mike Gesicki, it was a bust. Okay, so they went out and they spent money on Sheldon Rankins, who unfortunately had some struggles during the season because he had a personal injury. That's no fault to him, but they invested dollars on this defense. And guess what? They got the worst defense in the NFL. So why would it make sense for them to continue to pay some of those guys? And then you're saying, okay, well, they could have gone out in this free agency and spent dollars. This free agency class was weak. There wasn't anybody that's changing the Bengals defense that was really out there for them. You know, you could talk about Josh Sweat, but I mean, is Josh Sweat a game changer? Josh Sweat was a rotational guy for the Eagles who had some sacks, but the Eagles defense and their pass rush was predicated off of having numerous people on that offensive or on that defensive line. So if you're telling me that just one person is going to do that, I just don't see that happening, respectfully. I just don't see it. It's not like Jalen Carter is out there. It's not like some of the starters for them are out there. This was a weak free agency class. Now, if you're talking about trading for someone, I don't know who that person is. It takes two to tango. We all know that the Bengals are notorious when it comes to trades. They're not going to make a trade unless they are clearly winning that trade. And, you know, they're just to hinge everything on that just doesn't make sense when you got Tee Higgins at home. You got Jamar Chase at home. The one thing that you know about your team is that you need to keep some of the best players. And when you look at what the Bengals have, those are their best players. Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, uh, Joe Burrow, Trey Hendrickson. And then once you move from there, it's probably Orlando Brown, who you've already paid. So I'm just not understanding who these people are that the Bengals need to pay. Now, when it comes to the offensive line, I've seen a lot of people talking about that the Bengals need more resources on the offensive line. I understand that. I get that. But what people aren't realizing is when you look at what the offensive line was in 2021 and where they are now, although the offensive line isn't perfect, it is years better than it was. They have Orlando Brown Jr., a starting left tackle who played very well for them. They drafted Amarius Mims, who played amazing for them, even had a game where he blanked Myles Garrett. So when we talk about this, let's talk about the actual pieces on the roster. They have Ted Karras, who has been an above average center for them, right? The issues on the offensive line are not the entire offensive line. The issues on the offensive line are the guard positions. Alex Kappa, they cut him. I saw people complaining about them, national heads complaining about them cutting Alex Kappa. Alex Kappa was one of the worst guards in the NFL last season by all metrics. He was a triple clown. He led the team in sacks given up, pressures allowed, QB hits. Like, he was the worst lineman on the Cincinnati Bengals. All right. Then you look at the left guard, Cordero Verson, who I, for a long time, never really believed in. He wasn't the guy. He got benched. They put Cody Ford in there. He was okay, not much better, but stepped up when he needed to. And so the Bengals have had a guard issue. They've had a guard issue, guess what? Since when? Since Kevin Zeitler. Let's just keep it a buck. Since Kevin Zeitler and Clint Bowling, they've had issues at replacing players. That is why they didn't let Tee Higgins go, because they have a problem replacing players. When they let Jesse Bates go, now they have the Dax Hill situation. Now they have the Geno Stone situation. Now they've luckily got somebody in Jordan Battle, but they still haven't replaced that free safety position because they struggle replacing players. So when it comes down to this situation, if the Bengals are able to get a guard in this draft that is a guard that they can trust for the foreseeable future, they're going to be in better shape. They're going to be a better offensive line. The other thing is this as well. They got a new offensive line coach. Frank Pollock was not getting the best out of this group when they were playing. He was not. He simply was not. I was saying that Frank Pollock should have been fired years ago. And I'm not saying that I don't do this whole bragging on I was right thing, right? But I am going to bring it up. Frank Pollock was an issue, and that's a valid reason for it. Frank Pollock didn't deliver on some of the things that he was supposed to do. He was the run game coordinator. The run game sucked. Everything about this offensive line screamed underperforming. So when it comes down to it, the Bengals can still fix their offensive line through the draft. Now, I'm not particularly happy with what they did in free agency, but I'm going to be honest with you. Outside of a few guards, I don't see who was really the answer for the Cincinnati Bengals. Tevin Jenkins had back issues. And the one thing for me is the Bengals have signed a lot of these guys in free agency that have not played. They have not played, and they've had injuries. Riley Reef, all of these guys. And when it comes down to it, you're still out there with Cody Ford, and you're still out there with Jackson Kirkland's of the world. And for me, I wasn't willing to take that risk on somebody like Tevin Jenkins just simply because I wanted him over Jackson Carman. I want somebody there that's going to be young, has potential, is able to play for the foreseeable future, can be cheap. And if the Bengals address that and get the right guy in the draft, they can still do that. The issue is going to be the pass rush, right? You got to keep Trey Hendrickson, who's threatening possibly retiring right now. He threatened retirement last year. I think the Bengals can still get it done with Trey Hendrickson. I think if you give him a pay bump, at least for this season, you can get it done. Here's the thing about Trey. I love Trey. I will tell you that Trey Hendrickson is in the same class as Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. And some people are going to say, oh, wow, that's crazy. Look at the numbers. I'm not going back and forth with people. Look at the numbers. He's put them up 17 and a half this year, 17 and a half last year. You go back to 2020, you look at all three, he's got more sacks than them. All right. So even with him having all of that, the Bengals were still bad on defense. So if they choose to only pay him for a year and they go back to the drawing board and they try to figure it out from that perspective, I could kind of understand that, right? I don't think that they should. I think they should keep Trey, but there's nothing that I can argue saying that keeping Trey automatically means that this defense is going to be better because Trey is allowed to do his thing. They don't have anybody outside of Trey. But if they move on from Trey or something like that, or they let him play this last year and the Bengals defense doesn't improve, then you got to kind of look at it from a roster construction standpoint and say, does it make sense to pay this guy 30 or 40 mil if my defense is not going to be at least 20th, 21st, something? I can't be dead last 2-3 years in a row with Trey Hendrickson and paying him 40 million, right? So they have to do what they have to do there. I don't think that they have a plan outside of Trey. I think that you have to have some kind of plan there. But I also think that they have to get better position coaches, which I think they did. I think that they also have to get better partners in there and draft better. And that's just really what it is. The Bengals are going to have to draft better. And I'm happy that they've put themselves in a position where they have to draft better. The Bengals have not drafted well these past couple of seasons. A lot of people used to look at them as savants because of the Joe Burrow and the Tee Higgins and the Logan Wilson draft, and they were amazing in that draft. But even when you look at the Jamar Chase draft, yes, they got the pick right, picking him over Panay, but the rest of that draft was a disaster, right? Just keeping it a buck. They still have some question marks. I think last year's draft was solid, but they still have a 3-tech need. I don't know if Chris Jenkins is that guy. They immediately went out and drafted TJ Slayton, which means that I don't think that they think McKinley Jackson is the guy at nose tackle. They haven't gotten anything that they know of from Myles Murphy thus far. Now, in his defense, he hasn't gotten to play much at all, but they still have a question mark on him, which means that they need to still draft an edge rusher. They brought another edge rusher back with Joseph Osai, who they're trying to see his potential. And that's the thing, too. A lot of people said, oh, they're not signing Tee Higgins because of his agent. That's not correct. They didn't sign a lot of people because they weren't willing to guarantee the second season of their contracts. Like Kevin Zeitler was not represented by Dave Mulligetta. I could go on. A lot of these guys are not represented by Dave Mulligetta. And a lot of these guys had the same issue. Jamar Chase was not represented by Dave Mulligetta. Anybody, bro, Andrew Whitworth was not represented by Dave Mulligetta. Like, I get it. Dave Mulligetta would make it harder, but Dave Mulligetta is literally the average NFL agent. They all at least want at minimum that second year guaranteed. The Bengals weren't willing to do that. And so are the Bengals going to be willing to do that going forward? It appears that now that the contract has come out, the Bengals didn't do that. But that's going to be something that they have to deal with unless they draft these guys well. And if they don't do that, then you're going to have situations like Trey Hendrickson right now, where Trey Hendrickson just wants more guarantees in his contract. That's just where the NFL is heading. The Bengals haven't typically done that except for superstar players, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. So, that's what it is. But there's criticism with that, with the Tee Higgins contract, and that doesn't make sense because Tee Higgins always wanted to be a Bengal. He grew up a Bengals fan. He wanted to make it work out here. It was always going to be a discount if he took the deal in Cincinnati because Tee Higgins could go out on the market and get 34, 35 million a year easy and play for a very bad team that will be willing to just possibly even go up to 38 just because they're that desperate and wanting him to play for them. But he made a decision that was more so about, I want to play for the Bengals. That's why he moved away from David Mulligetta. That's why he moved away with and not only did he get rid of Dave Mulligetta, there's a reason that he picked the same agent as Jamar Chase. These were things that they thought of together to say, how can we use our leverage to make the Bengals sign Tee Higgins? I always thought that it should have been done with Joe Burrow, right? Like Joe Burrow refused to sign until Tee Higgins is extended. That's not what happened. But, they decided to do that from a leverage standpoint. So for people just saying that it's just a Dave Mulligetta thing, I get it. Dave Mulligetta has gone out and gotten guys guaranteed money. But there's no difference between him and Drew Rosenhaus. If you're dealing with these guys, you're going to have to give them guaranteed money up front. Now, I will say Dave Mulligetta is probably the best at it, and he makes these historic records when it comes to that. But he also represented Michael Pittman, who on record they have already said Tee Higgins would have taken that deal last season. So that makes the whole thing, in my opinion, null and void. That's not what the situation is. The situation is the Bengals have to start guaranteeing money to these players. That's why Trey Hendrickson isn't here. That's why a lot of these players will not be here unless they do it. But here's the other thing. If it's just a Dave Mulligetta issue, then why did they extend Joseph Osai? You can't have it both ways. He's a Dave Mulligetta agent, but they were able to give him the 1 year, $7 million. I think most of that may be guaranteed, but it's not that's just the issue. And they've got to change the narrative when it comes to that by making some of these deals happen. Now, I was under the impression that they did that with Tee Higgins. A lot of people are thinking that it isn't, but the thing saying that he's ripped off is just insane to me because they did not rip off Tee Higgins. They made a deal with Tee Higgins that Tee Higgins would only take in Cincinnati. All right. They're talking about some, oh, well, this year isn't guaranteed and the year before was going to be guaranteed. Yeah, it was going to be guaranteed because it was a franchise deal. They franchised them. They're not cutting Tee Higgins this offseason. Like, that's not happening. We all know that. They're going to pay Tee Higgins this season, and then he's got guarantees for next season. So to me, he's got 2 seasons under contract. They're not cutting Tee Higgins in training camp. Do you hear how crazy that sounds? And for what it's worth, if you've been watching the Bengals and following them for years, they have always stuck to those guarantees and paid those guys out. So that's what it is at the end of the day. The NFL really is scared because a lot of people were talking about, oh, they can't keep them. What are they going to do? They're cheap. They're this and that. Well, guess what? They got Tee Higgins, and you got to cry about it. And it is what it is. Please let me know what you guys think in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. I truly appreciate you guys rocking with the content. I will be back. Like I said, I'll be talking about everything now. You guys let me know in the comments what the next thing is that you guys want me to talk about. We can discuss that. I appreciate you guys so much. And as usual, got to do this first time. I'll leave you guys with a who day all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.